Okay, well, welcome to White Sands Self-Care. Whoops, now we're going. Okay, so welcome to White Sands Self-Care. I am your host, Laura Cross, and I have with me today Thomas Wilson. He is the owner and operator of R&H Creative Advocacy and Storytelling LLC. His primary focus is providing empathetic and person first led events and services focusing on censor-friendly storytelling. Thomas has partnered with over 40 businesses in Colorado, appeared on national and international podcasts, and has been recognized by numerous prominent leaders in the Neuro Diverse Community. His work has had a profoundly positive impact on the community and has helped to uplift community voice globally, which is wonderful. Thomas's work continuously progressing to build bridges between communities and those left behind. So, Thomas, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me on. I didn't realize how long that bio was until I had to
I
read it.
couldn't even, it was impressive, and I just couldn't think of a way to shorten it. I thought, you know what? We just need to have that whole thing there. Because I think what you do is really amazing. But maybe can you tell us, where does your story start?
Definitely. So I would say that my story, I love how I say that, well, I love how I came up with this, but I always say that my story starts with stories. I've been in love with stories ever since I was real little. My parents would read to me on a real regular basis. I've always loved hearing stories written. In fact, to this day, some of my favorite podcasts are just people reading stories and acting them out. Um, but I would also say that my stories really started with a point when I was 8 years old. And at that time, I lost someone very significant to me, and it was a life-changing moment. I had lost people before then, but this one was distinct in that it changed the course of my life forever. Not long after that, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And I always tell people I've probably been diagnosed about 4 dozen times with different things, all ranging from physical health to mental health and all different kinds of things. And that was really my first experience with the diagnosis community and how broken things can be in not just within diagnosis, but within mental health care and programs that are supposed to serve youth and supposed to serve all youth, really be helpful, and really just did not work. I spent a lot of my time after 8 being told I was the problem child, being disliked by my teachers. I do apologize anyone who's heard that, and it might be triggering to hear that word. I do apologize, but that is the most subtle way I can put how people used to phrase things. I also spent a good chunk of my life in and out of programs um, again, that failed me, that didn't really work for me. Part of that due to my own struggles with my mental health, part of that due to me not really fitting into their program. But also in general, just not always being the biggest fan of having a diagnosis. I grew up with a lot of shame, a lot of core people who were supposed to support me really taught me to hate my diagnosis, hate myself for my diagnosis. Luckily, I've always had some really great supports in my family, and so that's really where it starts. But it wasn't until I was probably about 17, where I really started to take my stories super seriously. I'm actually really proud to say that I published my first book outside of um, just after getting close to graduating high school. Two things people said I never would do. But it also tying back into the element of stories, it also really starts with me recognizing how stories can really empower and really make people feel safe.
Oh, we
And
lost you there a second. We can still hear you, but we lost your visual, just so
yeah,
you know.
my camera is a little sensitive, so
Gotcha. Go ahead.
um but anyways, yeah, it's I was gonna say it really starts with how stories can help people and really helps people feel special and helps them through difficult times. So after college, I really started having more books published, and really emphasizing the mentality around advocacy and getting into those worlds as well.
Yeah, well, for one, I think it's really amazing, especially when you can do that and accomplish so much, especially when you got so many people telling you you can't do that. It's like, yeah, I can. I
Mhm.
can. So I'm glad you had that support. So what drives you to do your work?
So there's definitely a few things. One of them being the purpose I get from my work,
Mhm.
to be able to call myself a storyteller. Well, really not just a storyteller, but an advocate, a writer, a journalist, a game master for tabletop role-playing games. It fills me with such joy, and I genuinely love the work I do. I always tell people though, if I didn't love it as much as I would have quit like a year ago because it's so much work. So it's a
Mhm.
lot of dedicated work. But the other side of it is there has been this really beautiful community that's been forming around the work that I do, around the mentalities that I practice, around empathy and person first care. And every day it seems like for the past year, there's been like I started my business in 2021, but the last year there seems to be like 4 or 5 new opportunities, some really wonderful things that pop up each week that push me outside of my comfort zone, but continue to make the world a better place. And it's truly wonderful.
Yeah, that is amazing. So the role-playing games, do you like the Dungeons and Dragons kind of thing, or what kind of?
Dungeons and Dragons, Call of Cthulhu. There are so many out
Oh,
in the world nowadays, but um both can be a little dark. Call of Cthulhu is a lot darker than a lot of D&D campaigns, but
yeah.
really great system.
Yeah, if you ever get in that world, that is it. That's kind of is its own community, itself too. So you have been through so much. What does your self-care journey kind of look like?
So I'm really proud to say that in the last several years it's gotten a lot better, but I definitely say I should have started applying it better when I was younger.
Mhm.
Um, Myself, like a lot of people with depression and anxiety, it's really hard to want to wake up from time to time. And that was definitely something I lived with as a youth and majority of my life. I also struggled with anxiety. I always refer to the fact that these experiences are not just physical or due to being tired. It's fighting the actual chemistry of the brain, and it's what makes it so much harder. And I spend a lot of my time being very hard on myself, being outright brutal, struggling with some very real realities that I don't want to bring up necessarily because I don't want to trigger your audience in any way. But I think those who know can know, and it took me a long time. It wasn't until I was in my late 20s when I really started thinking about it, really started aiming, and then had a couple rough years again. And in since 2021, I'm proud to say that I've really put in the effort a lot more. Part of that being because there are so many people out in the community who rely on me. There are so many great opportunities. Like I've started doing therapy more regularly. I've been working on exercising, practicing gratitude, coping skills, cognitive behavioral therapy, all of these things. And even as a kid, I knew that I should have done it. I really should have, but there's a beauty to figuring out things, I think in the 30s, 30 ages, where you have not just the emotional maturity, but the mental and spiritual desire to take care of ourselves. And I really do wish it came sooner, but the things that I've learned in those struggles in my mental health journey and my personal health journey have really emphasized the person who I want to be each day. And it's such a commitment on certain days and certain weeks, or even just in general, to do better, to be better, to care for myself as with so many others, and not let things bog me down.
Yeah, yeah, and that is normally tough, and I think we all have a tendency to do that, is to be hard on ourselves instead of celebrating the little wins. But you do these role playing events, you do these or role playing deals, you do really huge events. that's got to kind of take its toll on you. What do you do to help recover from such a big event?
So the big thing for me is finding my quiet, finding the little things that help me recharge I always call it my introvert battery. A lot of people assume I'm a lot more of an extrovert, especially when I'm at events. Um, and it's true, these events are very taxing. They require a lot of rest. And I have a lot of people who tell me, as I'm sure many other people do, that you need to socialize more. You need to do these things. And for me, it's stepping back, it's turning on a good TV show, it's taking a shower, it's doing the little things throughout the day that add a little bit more to that battery. And if I really need it, I work so hard to spend time in reflection and doing yoga, doing writing, doing these things that are for me and are solely for me, which is so huge, especially when so much of my life is dedicated to other people.
Yeah, definitely. So what keeps you working towards your best self?
I think, so I'd mentioned I'm really grateful for what I learned in my harder
Hmm.
times. And I would definitely say that's a big part of it. The memories, the moments of struggle when things were a lot harder, things were painful. I'm working so hard not to go back to those moments, not to give in to those thoughts. But I have to say it's for the community I'm building, but it's also for the people who are really close to me. Um, I'm a big believer that suffering in silence is rarely as silent as people think it is. And the people that I have that are really close to me, my nieces and nephews, my mom, my other family, my close friends, I acknowledge that if I were to slip back into the state that I was just a few years ago, it wouldn't just hurt me. It would hurt everyone around me and it would hurt everything I've built. And I'm not willing to go back to that.
Yeah. And that's understandable because you've done such amazing things. So do you want to tell us a little more about that community that you're building, the events that you hold?
Definitely. So my work goes beyond just Dungeons and Dragons. I do a lot of Dungeons and Dragons events because that's very popular in the community right now, and
Mhm.
that's one of the flagships. And that involves creating a safe space where kids can play role play games, they can roll dice, they can feel appreciated, be themselves. And to emphasize that a little bit more, a lot of my events are designed around the people who are attending. So when I do active play events or Dungeons and Dragons or other storytelling events, a big part of my focus is not forcing everyone to participate all the time. It's not me always talking. It's not a super rigid structure. It's making sure people are heard and valued, but they have the ability to honor their sensory needs. They have the ability to honor their movement needs. A lot of people that I work with sitting for an hour and a half it's not fun. It's tedious.
Mhm.
And it causes the mind to burn out. I also have done public speaking events centered around the importance of active play, mindfulness, empathy-based leadership. I also do work around talks around the reality of the workplace in modern America and how it's really not designed for a lot of people. And when I do that, I try to emphasize not to shame the people working there, but to help them realize that if they were to emphasize more person first mindsets, more accessibility in the workplace, a lot more people would be there. At this point, if I were to dive into every event that I do, well, we would be here for like 3, 4 hours. Um, but the main focus on events for youth and other people is really that safe space, that idea of camaraderie, that idea of being heard, and that idea of shared storytelling so that people, no matter their sensory needs, whether or not they're neurodiverse, they can go to a place, they can listen to a story, they can listen to a speech or a video or a class and feel heard and feel valued and appreciated. And I think it's a very strong contrast to a lot of events nowadays,
Mhm.
not to
Yeah.
shame any events, but to emphasize that there's things that just don't work for people, and there's some that do, some that don't. But it's important for everyone to have access to things that work for them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Yeah. And I love that because, you kind of meet people where they're at and, and you can connect with them. Now, I know you're in the Colorado area, right? Denver
Mhm.
area. Is that the only place where you do the events or you connect with your community? Do you stay pretty much local or do you do anything online?
So I actually do several events online. I've led talks online. I've done Dungeons and Dragons online. The reason I do that is for the sake of accessibility. There's a lot of people that I've worked with that just they don't have access to things that they need in their community. And the other reason is I realized, as many people did in the COVID era, and if you're listening to this and you screamed for a second, I apologize. But I think a lot of people realize there's a lot of things that don't work in person. There's a lot of health risks. There's a lot of fears. There's a lot of people who still are afraid to go to the grocery store. So I offer online events so that people can meet their peers, so that they can break out and connect with people in a space that's actually safe and makes them feel content without that pressure to explore a world that still very much scares them.
Yeah, yeah. And that's true. So what is the best way for people to get a hold of you or get in touch with
So
you?
I have my link tree, which I can make sure that you have.
Mhm.
I also have my email. I was thinking Zoom for some reason. That's not it. Um, I have my email, which is ndttrpg, and I realized those letters might sound so similar that you couldn't quite hear, so I'll make sure that's put in any description.
Okay.
Those are great ways to get a hold of me. Those are great ways to experience what I do and ask me questions, and I'm always a fan of people asking questions, so those are some of the best ways.
Absolutely. I really want to thank you for taking the time and sharing that with all of us. Is there any last words you'd like to leave people with today?
Yeah, the only thing that I would say in this ever-changing world is please take care of yourself. Please don't feel like you have to do everything alone. I mentioned, suffering in silence is rarely as silent as people think, and I really do believe that. And if you need help finding resources and you have questions about that, I'm more than happy to help.
Thank you. And thank you for being with us. All of Thomas's information will be in the description and in the comments if you're watching this either on YouTube or in the Facebook, the self-care community. So yeah, I invite anybody to, join that self-care community, connect with Thomas, because that's what I'm here for, is to help provide a connection, a collaboration, education, and resources. So whatever people need to support them in living a healthier life. So thank you so much for joining us, and I will see everybody next time.